Iran is now into several days of Operation True Promise 3, and it has absolutely shaken Israel and the United States. This is an incredible scene to see Tel Aviv, Haifa, central occupied Palestine, or Israel, as it's called, burning, to see buildings demolished, to see military installations taken down, to hear that F-35s, 3 now, according to Iran, have been downed. Iran has been using decoys, has been fooling Israeli drones and Israeli fighter jets as they attempt to supposedly take out the quote-unquote nuclear facilities. But those facilities remain intact. Fordo, Isfahan, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Natanz, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly either. But they're all still up and standing. They have not been taken out. Iran's terrain is posing huge problems, but so too is Iran's military capabilities. This is absolutely stunning in the sense that it has pierced Israel's exceptionalism, this idea of Israeli superiority. Israel went into this desperate. I don't think many people understand that when Israel conducted this strike, this was not the timing that I believe the United States wanted. So Israel, Netanyahu, came into this thinking that if it could shock, if it could surprise, if it could conduct what some say was a cyber attack that led to the ultimate initial strike against Iran, those over 200 fighter jets that came in, conducted many decapitation strikes, landed a blow on Iran, but now that element of surprise is completely over. It's gone. It's not happening again, or at least if the United States enters, we will see much more destruction. But right now, all Israel can do, it seems, is target civilians. We see Tehran burning. I've had Mohammed Randi on my show tell me that a building right near him has been targeted. 20 children killed, eliminated. It's an absolutely despicable and atrocious thing that we are seeing, but this is all about desperation. This is not about nuclear weapons. This is about the United States and Israel seeing the clock ticking on their waning dominance and really their waning legitimacy, and they're trying to take Iran out. The problem with trying to take Iran out, though, is Iran's escalation dominance. They have an incredible number of missiles. They just started demonstrating their hypersonic missile capabilities. The imagery of Tel Aviv being struck with hypersonic missiles is an absolute humiliation for the Israeli regime and the United States, which now Israel is on its knees begging for the U.S. to become more directly involved in this. This is an absolutely incredible development that we are following here on this channel. Now, we have to talk about the significance not only of the military side of this, which is huge. When you have downed F-35s, when you have Israeli infrastructure being taken out, when you see that people now, Israelis, are under the rubble after 20 months plus of what they have done to Gaza. Now you have actually Israeli officials talking about, we are Gaza now. Well, you are the ones who instigated this. Gaza is it was the igniting flame to what we see now. This need for Israel to, with the United States' help, expand as much as it can. Now it is paying the price of its absolutely vicious and expansionist agenda. So a big part of this now, Operation True Promise 3, and what we are seeing is much more than military. We are seeing Israel on its knees begging the United States because there is a big problem for Israel, and that is that the United States, on the one hand, will give Israel everything it wants, to do whatever it wants, at least everything that it can give. But now the United States, now Israel are in a very precarious situation. Now they have to consider, how far do they go with this? Does the United States meet with Israel, which I'm sure they're doing, around the clock at this point, both covertly, and soon we will see a news, I'm sure, of what the results of these meetings will be, where they need to decide whether they want to come in with their bombers and their bunker busters and begin leveling Iran. It is not a guarantee. Actually, it is likely certain that Iran will maintain its capabilities over this period, and the United States has to decide whether they want the embarrassment of a downed F-35, downed F-18, downed aircraft. That is really the consideration, because when that happens, when the United States takes a direct blow, when one of their naval destroyers is sunken to the bottom of the sea, when U.S. assets in the region, in the Gulf, when those are targeted and struck, when the Strait of Hormuz is closed off, when these things begin to happen, the United States will have to consider the unthinkable. Why? Not because any of us on this channel agree with this, or at least most of us who watch this channel don't want to see this, but when we look into the mindset, the interests of the empire, of the American empire, we know that the United States empire has never been able to handle any challenger, anyone that can demonstrate, regardless of its political and economic system, any power, any country, any nation, any force that can demonstrate parity, that can demonstrate maybe a dual power in comparison to it. No, it cannot tolerate this. And there's no bigger embarrassment or humiliation for the United States than to see its supposedly exceptional and undefeated military, which is, of course, untrue. The United States military has been defeated over and over and over again. Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, we can go on and on and on. But should Iran, which would be seen if Iran's projectiles and ballistic missiles, etc., down a naval destroyer of the United States, it would then be seen as a pure power. And of course, with this nuclear threat talk, that would all be used to ignite a possible nuclear strike on Iran and to essentially put the world into the biggest global calamity, maybe in the history of geopolitical and political and economic developments. That's really what's at stake here. And this is why the United States and the Trump administration have a lot of considerations to make, have a lot of thinking to do, a lot of reflection to do, because this is no longer schoolyard games. This is not, oh, Donald Trump, we're going to knock everyone out, we're going to punch everyone in the face and everyone is going to bow. Iran has shown that it is not going to bow. Iran won't bow to the United States. It won't bow to Israel. It won't bow to the combined West. It has been under sanctions, under the threat of war since 1979, and now it is showing what it can do when it is cornered and backed into against the wall. So Operation True Promise 3, of course, is much more than the missiles, than the explosions that are sending a cathartic effect across the world. We see how people in Lebanon, people in Yemen, people in the West Bank, people all across the region are celebrating this because Israel is the most hated country in the world, and the United States is fast becoming one of the most hated countries in the world, if not it already is, because of its undying support for this regime, which has committed genocide, which has attempted to destabilize the region, and has expansionist ambitions that put the world at complete risk. We are seeing the consequences of all of this, folks. This is a historic moment in geopolitics, in world development, in the political and economic history of humanity in a big sense, because we have to remember the arc of history here. The United States, Israel, they have been down this road before, but never have they been challenged in this way. They have seen resistance their entire reign. Their entire reign they have seen resistance. But even when they've lost, they have maintained this veneer of superiority. Even after they lost to Vietnam, they could claim they killed millions of people. Even after they lost to Korea, they can claim they were able to split and partition it and, of course, turn South Korea into a vassal state. Even when they lost Afghanistan, they could claim that the entire region, while not under their dominion, was, of course, destabilized to the point where at least the U.S. has a major presence in the region militarily. Not so much economically, but of course economics is influenced by the military front. So, after the Soviet Union fell in 1990, the United States was able to maintain this image of superiority by essentially waging wars of destruction all over the world, of regime change. So now we are seeing Israel put the United States and itself in the position that is completely desperate. And the developments here are stunning. So when we look at what's happening in Tel Aviv, for example, we have infrastructure developments. We have people trapped under the rubble in central Israel. We have imagery going across the world of Iranian ballistic missiles flying across the sky and Israeli air defenses being unable to shoot them down. And then we have the United States, which is now, regardless of what you believe, right? Because I believe the United States is never an honest actor, or at least the foreign policy establishment is never an honest actor. So they're claiming they're not involved in this. But we know that they've sent missiles to Israel before it conducted its initial strike. We know that the United States is always providing intelligence, logistical, and military support. And we know that nothing that Israel does is not without the information of the United States at some level. So we've seen Israel and the United States engage in conflict and dispute. Now, of course, these conflicts might seem relatively negligible in the grand scheme of things. When you have Gaza, the genocide in Gaza continue, even after Trump's so-called ceasefire brokered, we saw that dropped very hard and very quickly. Of course, the carnage in Lebanon, the normalization of Al-Qaeda in Syria between both of them. We know that the United States is, of course, going hand over foot to serve Israeli interests because the United States believes, the foreign policy establishment believes that serves their interests. But we do see fissures, and one of those big fissures is this theater of war. We saw it with Yemen, for example. A big part of why the United States entered into Yemen was not only to destroy Ansar Allah for itself, because Ansar Allah was targeting U.S. naval destroyers, causing huge embarrassments. The U.S. was losing jets off the coast of the Red Sea. They say they just fell off off of the USS destroyers, but we know that there could have very well been a direct hit from Yemen's ballistic missiles. So a big part of that was Israel. Israel wanted to see this part of the axis of resistance destroyed, and the United States saw that as a complete alignment of interests. But the United States had to pull out of that conflict. The United States could not suffer any more embarrassing military defeats. The United States, under Donald Trump, said, well, if we continue along this way, we're going to run out of weapons and money, and that's what happened. Of course, money, let's be honest. They could print money forever and ever and ever. But in terms of the investment, where they wanted to put military resources, the United States foreign policy establishment had to tap out with Yemen. But Yemen continued its escalation on Israel, its operation against Israel, even to this day. They're helping Iran right now with their Operation True Promise 3. So do you see how there is a conflict here between the United States and Israel, in the sense that Donald Trump in the United States has to consider how they are going to, how the foreign policy establishment is going to manage this escalating crisis. The overall goal is regime change. They want to see Iran's regime, Iran's leadership, Iran's sovereignty completely and utterly destroyed. They want it gone, and they've wanted it gone for decades. Can they do it, though? That is really what the United States has to consider. And as the superpower, as the imperial albatross, a declining one at that, as a declining imperial albatross, the United States' foreign policy establishment has to consider whether it can sustain a full-scale war on Iran. I say the United States foreign policy establishment cannot sustain this. Why? Because the United States is exhausted in Ukraine. The United States is exhausted trying to militarily encircle China. The United States has already been exhausted in West Asia. It's already seen its legitimacy decline here and wane, and its military arsenal has been depleted. So you even have Eldridge Colby, one of the undersecretaries, the second in command of the Pentagon, say that no, we need to continue to focus on China. This is a big problem. There are divisions in the ruling circle, in the foreign policy establishment, about where to put focus. And Israel wants the United States to go full throttle with Iran. And Iran's demonstration of its capabilities here puts the United States in a very, very precarious and, dare I say, dangerous position. Because in the sense that if it intervenes and if it suffers any blows, which it will suffer. Maybe the USS Carl Vinson, Ronald Reagan, maybe it sinks to the bottom of the sea. Maybe an F-16, F-35 with US pilots gets downed. And then what? The political atmosphere becomes toxic for war. It becomes absolutely imbued in aggressive, hawkish, nuclear calls for the destruction of Iran. And this is where I believe the United States is in its most precarious position, because to go this route under an unstable Trump administration that has not even had its bearings anywhere yet, has accomplished nothing with Ukraine, has accomplished nothing in West Asia, has accomplished nothing but capitulation and caving and embarrassing moves with regard to trade with China. And of course, the domestic situation in the United States, not so good. So all of this is to say is that the end of the Trump administration is very near and will be sown should the United States go deeper into this. So this is the situation, everyone. Operation True Promise 3 has sent shockwaves across the world. It is showing that Israel is not invincible. It is showing that the United States is not invincible. It is showing that even a sanctioned country, one that has been under the threat of war for decades, can build up the capabilities to stand up for itself when it is bullied, when it is cornered. And now people have had criticisms of Iran. They've said Iran has not done enough. I know a lot of people who watch my show have said Operation True Promise 3 should have happened sooner, after that October 2024 strike, after Israel violated Iranian sovereignty again, and after we have seen over and over again that Israel has been threatening exactly what it did when it struck Iran several days ago and took civilians and attempted to, and of course decapitated much of its military leadership. And on the one hand, I see the point, because I believe that if you're bullied, if you are put into a situation where your existential survival is put under threat, which I believe Iran's has been for quite some time, that means that eventually something's got to give. And perhaps Iran should have conducted Operation True Promise 3 sooner. But there are many considerations here, including the fact that the other side is not rational. The other side is not capable of learning lessons. The other side is more than capable of going a completely nuclear and catastrophic route in order to respond in a way that it feels maintains its veneer of dominance and its veneer of being the imperial superpower, which means that Iran has had to have navigated this situation to the point where it was put in a position that it was attacked first and attacked hard. And that meant Iran had to go into the mode of war, not only war preparations, but engaging in war, because that's where we are right now. We are in a state of war. We are witnessing the build up toward a full-scale war between the U.S. and Iran, not just indirect support like the United States is giving now, if we want to call it quote-unquote indirect, but we are entering a period where Israel is now facing a difficult situation. Either it continues to allow itself to be pummeled and bombarded with missiles, because Israel can't seem to get it out of its head that targeting civilians is only going to lead to more reaction or retaliation. But either it continues to go all along this route and beg the United States and hope the United States enters in a way where it sends its bombers into Iranian airspace, where it sends its aircraft carriers to launch strikes on Iran, or it settles. It says, we're done. We can't do this anymore. We've give up. Unconditional surrender. We will now go back to where things were just a few days ago. So this is really the options that Israel faces. And in effect, it's what the United States faces. Because on the other side, the United States has to consider, do we enter the war? Do we face catastrophic potential losses militarily that we've never had in the past, or at least never had to show people in the past, the global public opinion in the past? Do we put the global economy into the utter abyss, which means that the rich who control the United States are going to find themselves in a lot worse position than they ever have been, and they don't like that? The U.S.'s military and political standing in the world falling even farther. So you have an economic, a military, and a political crisis all coming to a head as we speak. And this means that either the United States takes the bait, moves into a state of readiness toward its own eventual self-destruction, should it go to war with Iran, or it does what Israel seemingly is heading toward, a kind of surrender that will leave a huge mark on world public opinion. This is an absolutely stunning moment. Operation True Promise 3 has put all of this into motion. Israel is begging for help. The United States is in a precarious state. And Iran, well, of course, facing dangers, facing civilian losses, facing the brunt of the empire, facing its aggression, is still standing and is likely to continue to still standing so long as the nuclear option is on pause. That's the reality. And this is where we are in the world.